one piece of advice, if you can, keep the team lean, keep it efficient, and if you have to, hire contractors on a per project basis and then move forward. Because honestly, from even just running an agency, it's a little bit different, but we got really bloated really quickly during the pandemic, and it hurt us in the long run, and now we've shrunk the team from 22 people down to 7 people. So one piece of advice is, if you don't have to hire, don't hire, use contractors, pay them for the work, and move on. Because I think, especially at this stage when you guys are growing and doing all these things, a lot of the stuff out there you probably could get done with contractors without, hitting your bottom line with a lot of extra expenses and stuff like that. So just one little piece of advice.
I totally agree. We actually just went through that in January.
Oh, you did?
I like to
Okay.
say you have to scale down and scale up.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, as somebody, like, I love having a team. Like, I
Of
love
course.
having people to talk with, to bounce ideas off of. But as a startup founder, you do have to look at that bottom line, and you do have to recognize that sometimes that isn't necessarily possible. Um, it's funny though, because it's like I feel like I've learned that lesson really hard twice recently. But then also in my first company ever, my co-founder and I, we hired like 10 people at the time. And keep in mind, so we were still students and this was a not for profit. So by hire, I mean we hired volunteers.
Right.
And we had like 10 to 12 volunteers or something. And then we realized very quickly that we did not need any of them. Like we were doing way better and being way more efficient just having ourselves. And so we ended up having to fire like 12 people. And my one of my professors and my mentors at the time, he was just like, like you didn't really fire them. You basically just ask them to stop hanging it out. And like it just stuck with me for the rest of like my entrepreneur career, because
Yeah.
it's true. Like that is a huge lesson that I feel like everybody learns one way or another. You get so excited, you get hire happy when things are going well, and then you
Right.
realize that like it's just not suitable for the long term growth of your company.
Exactly. And then also seeing some of these, multi-billion dollar companies going through the same thing, it almost
Oh
in a way
yeah.
doesn't make you feel as terrible, because you're like, "Oh, what did I do wrong?" And it's like, "No, all of these people did the same exact thing, and everyone's having to dial back now because they overhired." And they just, I mean, you don't know what you don't know type of thing. And at the time it seemed like a good idea. And but yeah, that's pretty crazy. So tell me about a little bit about your previous entrepreneurial, career. Like, where did that all start from? Is that something that you were always passionate about, like building your own business, and you started early on, or was this something recent that happened over the past like few years that really like sparked something within you?
That's a great question. I'm an immigrant. I think that's a great place
Where are
to
you from,
start
if I may
there.
ask you? Where are you
Oh
from?
yeah, I'm from Venezuela.
Oh, Venezuela. Okay, awesome, awesome.
Yeah, so both my parents are engineers, and somehow both my brother and I ended up with the entrepreneurial spirit. I think a lot of it is like just not necessarily wanting to succeed, but needing to. That kind
Right.
of like hustle culture was really ingrained in us as like when we were very young. We moved through 4 countries before we landed in Canada, and yeah, each one
I have a very similar story, so we can get into that a little bit later.
yeah, each one has like its own challenges, and you kind of have to rise above in order to survive. And so yeah, I mean, I started my first company when I was like a kid. I mean, I started off with I think it was newspaper delivery, and that wasn't me starting it. That was me finding a job at like very young age. My first company that I actually ran was a design business when I was 15 and 16, and then I had it until I was about 18 or so, where I just developed, I did design work and coding work for a variety of different like small to medium sized businesses, helped pay for, the extras in high school. Then I got to university. I moved away from home, and I realized that I wanted friends. I'm a super extroverted person. I get my energy from people. And so I
Me
had
too.
to
Me
join
too.
something, right? Like I met this person who was just like, you have to join this club, and I did. And the club at the time, I had zero interest in it, but I was just like, people that seem to like me, like I'm gonna hang out here. and it was building social ventures around the world. And so I ended up doing beekeeping and microloans in Kenya. Then I started a water project in India. Then I started my, I guess, my first real company, because it was the biggest one, was Green Igloo, where I focused on food security and food sovereignty in Canada's Arctic, which then I started it, it got bigger. Then we moved beyond the Arctic and went into more desolate areas. So there were places in Ontario, BC, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. But yeah, I mean, in terms of your question, like, was it the entrepreneurial spirit? I feel like it's just kind of always been there, and I've always just kind of followed passions I was interested in. With my first company, the pandemic hit, and I realized that I had become this like person who didn't have a personality outside of my role, and that wasn't who I wanted to be. And so I really focused on figuring out like what other passions did I have, what did I want to do, what did I want to be when I grew up, like that question
Right,
that you
right.
have to kind of ask yourself. And I landed on psychedelics with the help of friends and some shrooms, and here we are 3 years later.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I for myself, and whoever is listening to this, do your own research. Like everyone's got to do their own thing about what you're putting into your body and all this other stuff. This is not any kind of advice or anything, but I myself have really seen a lot of benefits from it. Microdosing and all these other things, and so to each his own at the end of the day. But I think that a lot of people, I always lean on the side of like natural medicine and holistic stuff rather than going into like the pharmaceutical things and all of that. So for me, it's been doing a lot. I went through some mental health stuff in the past and all that stuff. So but yeah, it's a big thing. And for me being extroverted and all of these things you just said, it really clicked because I've been itching to get to like some sort of big event, some sort of big conference, whether it's around e-commerce stuff or whatever it might be, is just being around people gives me energy. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, Stephanie, is like, I feel like this podcast that I do and I get to shine a little bit of light on, it's not a big light, but it's a light on fellow founders and different things, is just getting to know people and getting to connect with them on a different basis and seeing what they're up to, how they do things, and just seeing their journey. Because like you said, you're an immigrant, went through 4 countries. My family did the same thing from Eastern Europe to Germany to the US and all these other things. And so some of these stories are really awesome. And I feel like if anybody does listen to it, it hopefully gives them a little bit of that spark, that little inspiration to, chase whatever they're doing. And now the internet's so damn wide open, you can start anything literally almost for free. And I hope that pushes people over into that category and try something for themselves, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to say there's never going to be a perfect time.
Exactly.
Whenever I feel like when entrepreneurs are like, "Oh, I have this idea, I really want to do it." And they're just like, "Okay, well, I need to do more research into this, or I need to find a good name because the other handles are taken," or like there's just always a but. And it's just there's never going to be a good time. The best way to start is to start today, even if that's telling somebody just your idea. Like get it rolling. Start to hold yourself accountable.